I was 17 when it all started, standing in the kitchen of our two-story house in Beaverton, just outside Portland, holding my first real paycheck. The autumn rain drummed against the windows, a sound that always made our home feel cozy and safe. Back then, I still believed in that safety. $243, I announced proudly, waving the check from Grind Coffee, the local shop where I'd been working after school for 3 weeks. The smell of my mom's lasagna filled the air, and everything felt normal, perfect even. My dad looked up from his laptop at the kitchen island, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He was an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, always wearing those pressed khakis and button-down shirts that made him look responsible, trustworthy. That's great, honey. Real money for real work. I was thinking I could save most of it, I said, already imagining the things I wanted. New clothes that weren't hand-me-downs from my older cousin, maybe a car eventually, definitely college expenses. Portland State wasn't cheap, even with in-state tuition. My mom turned from the stove, her brown hair pulled back in that practical ponytail she always wore after work at the dental office. Actually, Nick, your father and I have been talking. She exchanged a look with Dad that I didn't quite understand then, but would learn to recognize over the next 8 years. We think it would be smart if we helped you manage this money. Manage it? Dad closed his laptop and gave me that smile he used when explaining complicated financial concepts. Sweetie, you're young. It's easy to spend money on things that don't matter. If you give us your paychecks, we'll make sure it goes toward important things. Family expenses, your future, building good habits. But it's my money, I said, though my voice came out smaller than I intended. Of course it is, Mom said quickly. We're not taking it. We're helping you save it. Teaching you responsibility. She moved closer, putting her hand on my shoulder. Trust me, honey. Most kids your age would blow this on clothes and makeup. We're looking out for your future. The word trust hung in the air like a challenge. These were my parents, the people who'd raised me, who drove me to school every day, who helped with homework and made sure I had everything I needed. If I couldn't trust them, who could I trust? What about spending money? I asked. Like, if I want to go to the movies with friends or something? We'll give you an allowance, Dad said. $20 a week should be plenty for a teenager. The rest goes into your account for safekeeping. I looked at the check in my hands. After taxes, I'd worked 60 hours that month for this money. My feet ached from standing behind the counter, my clothes smelled permanently of espresso, and I'd missed hanging out with friends because of my work schedule. But $20 a week sounded reasonable, didn't it? My parents had never steered me wrong before. I guess that makes sense, I said finally. The relief on their faces was immediate. Dad stood up and hugged me, his cologne mixing with the smell of dinner. You're making a smart choice, Nick. This is how you build wealth, how you prepare for the future. That night, I endorsed the check over to my parents and felt like I was doing something mature, something responsible. I was learning valuable lessons about money management and delayed gratification. At least, that's what I told myself as I handed over every dollar I'd earned. The pattern was set that easily. Every 2 weeks, I'd bring home my paycheck and hand it over without question. They'd give me my $20 allowance, praise me for my maturity, and remind me how proud they were of my work ethic. Sometimes when I was feeling particularly good about our arrangement, Dad would even show me a bank statement with my name on it, pointing to the growing balance. See? He'd say. Look how much you've saved already. Most kids your age have nothing. By Christmas of my senior year, I'd given them nearly $2,000. The bank statement showed every deposit, neat and organized, proof that my sacrifice was worth something. When I graduated high school that spring, the balance had grown to almost $4,000. I felt rich, responsible, successful. I had no idea I was being trained for the next 8 years of my life. College started that fall, and with it came new expenses and new jobs. I worked at the campus bookstore during the week and picked up shifts at a Mexican restaurant on weekends. Between classes, work, and studying, I barely had time to think about money, which made it even easier to maintain our arrangement. College is expensive, Mom reminded me regularly. Room and board, textbooks, meal plans. We're helping cover some of these costs, so it's only fair that you contribute what you can. It made sense. They were supporting my education, giving me a place to live when I came home, providing stability while I figured out my future. The least I could do was help with expenses. Besides, they were still saving money for me, still building that account with my name on it. The balance kept growing, at least according to the statements Dad showed me every few months. By my sophomore year, it was over $15,000. By junior year, $22,000. I felt like I was doing everything right, building a foundation for my adult life while my classmates racked up credit card debt and lived paycheck to paycheck. You're going to graduate debt-free with a nice nest egg, Dad would say. And I believed him completely. It wasn't until my senior year, when I started looking for apartments and thinking about post-graduation life, that I began to ask questions about accessing my money. That's when everything started to unravel, though I wouldn't understand the full scope of what had happened for several more months. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed, all the warning signs I ignored because I wanted to believe my parents had my best interests at heart. But at 17, 18, 19, 21, I was just a girl who trusted her family and wanted to do the right thing. I had no idea how much that trust would cost me. By my junior year at Portland State, I was working 3 jobs. The campus bookstore gig had expanded into a work-study position at the admissions office. The weekend restaurant shifts had become a regular bartending job at O'Malley's downtown, and I'd picked up tutoring sessions for extra cash. My days started at 6 in the morning and ended well past midnight, but I told myself it was worth it. I was building character, contributing to my family, and supposedly saving thousands of dollars. The rain was coming down hard that November evening when I finally made it home to my parents' house in Beaverton. I'd moved back in sophomore year to save money on rent, another decision that seemed smart at the time. My mom was waiting in the living room, and I could tell from her expression that we needed to talk. "Your father lost his biggest client last month," she said without preamble. "Peterson Industries. They're restructuring and decided to handle their accounting in-house." I sank into the couch, exhaustion hitting me all at once. "I'm sorry, Mom, that's terrible. It's a significant income loss," she continued, her voice taking on that tone I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant I was about to be asked for something. "We're going to need your help more than ever." "I'm already giving you everything I make," I said, confused. "What more can I do?" "Well, there's your account," she said carefully. "The money we've been saving for you. We might need to borrow from it temporarily, just until your father finds new clients." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Borrow from my account?" "It's still your money, Nick. We're just asking to use it for family expenses right now. Think of it as an investment in our family's stability." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Once things turn around, we'll pay it back with interest." I wanted to say no. Something deep inside me was screaming that this was wrong, that once they touched that money, I'd never see it again. But how could I say no to my own family when they were struggling? How could I be so selfish when they'd sacrificed so much for my education? "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. "Just $10,000 to start, to catch up on the mortgage and cover some bills." $10,000, nearly half of what I'd saved over 4 years of constant work. But it was temporary, right? They'd pay it back. "Okay," I said, and watched relief flood my mother's face. The next month, they needed another $5,000. Dad had gotten a new client, but the payment terms were net $60, and they couldn't wait that long for the money. Then it was $3,000 for home repairs after a pipe burst in the basement. Then $2,000 for Mom's medical bills when she needed a minor surgery. By the time I graduated with my marketing degree that spring, my account balance had dropped to less than $4,000. But I told myself things would get better now that I had a real job lined up at Morrison Digital Marketing, a growing agency in downtown Portland. I'd be making $35,000 a year, more money than I'd ever seen, and surely my parents' financial situation would stabilize. I was so naive. My first day at Morrison was everything I'd dreamed of. The office occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls, modern furniture, and windows that looked out over the Willamette River. I had my own desk, my own computer, and business cards with my name on them. Nick Henderson, Junior Marketing Associate. David Chen, the Senior Associate who was training me, showed me around the office with enthusiasm. He was maybe 30, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an easy smile that made me feel welcome. "You'll love it here," he said as we grabbed coffee from the break room. "Morrison's one of the good ones. They actually care about their employees, not just the bottom line." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that everything was finally falling into place. That first month, I was so excited to bring home my paycheck that I could barely contain myself. After taxes and deductions, it was nearly $2,400, more money than I'd ever earned in a month. I imagined keeping some of it for the first time in years, maybe getting my own apartment, finally having some independence. But when I got home that evening, both my parents were waiting for me in the kitchen. Dad had printed out a spreadsheet, color-coded and organized with the precision of a man who'd spent his career managing other people's money. "Congratulations on your first real job, sweetheart," he said, but his tone was businesslike. "Now that you're earning a professional salary, we need to discuss your contribution to household expenses." "My contribution?" Mom jumped in before I could process what was happening. "You're 22 now, Nick, an adult with a college degree and a real career. It's time you started paying your fair share." Dad slid the spreadsheet across the table. "We've calculated your portion of the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and general household expenses. Based on your salary, We think $1,800 a month is fair. $1,800. That would leave me with barely $600 a month for everything else. Gas, clothes, student loan payments I'd need to start making soon, any hope of saving for my own place. But what about my account? I asked desperately. The money I've been saving all these years? What about it? Dad asked, his eyebrows raised. I thought, now that I have a real job, I could start using some of that money, maybe get my own apartment or at least keep more of my paycheck. The look that passed between my parents made my stomach drop. It was the same look from years ago, but now I was old enough to recognize it for what it was. Calculation, strategy, manipulation. Honey, Mom said in that patronizing voice she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. That money is for your future, for emergencies, for buying a house someday, for real investments. You can't just spend it on rent and groceries. Besides, Dad added, most of that money has already been invested in the family. The loans we took from your account helped us keep this house, helped us support you through college. You wouldn't want us to lose our home just so you could have your own apartment, would you? The words hit me like a physical blow. Loans. They were calling it loans now, but I'd never agreed to lend them anything. They'd told me they were borrowing temporarily, that they'd pay it back, but now they were talking like I owed them something. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's simple, Dad said, his accountant voice in full effect. You've been living here rent-free for 22 years. You've eaten our food, used our utilities, benefited from our support. Now it's time to contribute like an adult. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, the same room with the same pink walls and stuffed animals from when I was 12, and tried to make sense of what had happened. I was a college graduate with a professional job, but I had less financial freedom than I'd had in high school. I was trapped in a system that seemed designed to keep me dependent, to keep me contributing to a family that took everything I gave and always needed more. I started to research apartments online, just to see what my options were. Even studio apartments in the cheapest parts of Portland were running $800 to $1,000 a month, plus deposits and utilities. With only $600 left after my family's demands, independent living seemed impossible. 3 months into my new job, I was more financially trapped than ever, but I was also starting to understand something important. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how functional families operated. This wasn't love or support or teaching responsibility. This was control. And I was finally old enough to see it for what it was. The question was, what was I going to do about it? It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything fell apart. I was running late for work, juggling my coffee and laptop bag as I rushed to my Honda Civic, the same beat-up car I'd been driving since college. The Portland rain was doing that thing where it couldn't decide if it wanted to be a drizzle or a downpour, so it was somehow both at once. I turned the key, and nothing happened. Not even the pathetic wheeze the car usually made when the engine was struggling. Just complete, devastating silence. Come on, I muttered, trying again. Still nothing. I popped the hood and stared at the engine like somehow my marketing degree had secretly included automotive repair training. Steam was rising from somewhere near the radiator, and there was a smell that definitely meant expensive problems. I called David from work, knowing he'd cover for me with our boss, then spent the morning getting the car towed to Jerry's auto repair on Sandy Boulevard. Jerry, a guy in his 60s with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails, gave me the kind of look that meant my wallet was about to get much lighter. Engine's seized up, he said after an hour of poking around under the hood. Overheated so bad it warped the block. I'm sorry, kiddo, but this car's done for. What do you mean done for? I mean it would cost more to fix than the car's worth. You're looking at $4,000, maybe $5,000 in repairs for a vehicle that's worth maybe $1,500 on a good day. The number hit me like a physical blow. $5,000. I had maybe $800 in my checking account after giving my parents their monthly tribute. My savings account, what was left of it, was supposedly around $3,000, but I hadn't seen an actual statement in months. I need a car to get to work, I said desperately. Isn't there anything cheaper you can do? Jerry's expression softened. Tell you what, I've got a 2008 Corolla Outback that needs some work, but it's drivable. Previous owner couldn't pay for the repairs, so I took it in trade. I could let you have it for $3,000, cash. $3,000. Exactly what I hoped was left in my savings account. I took the bus home that afternoon, my mind racing with plans. I'd ask my parents for access to my account, buy Jerry's car, and finally have reliable transportation again. It was my money, after all. Money I'd earned over 8 years of constant work. Surely they'd understand this was exactly the kind of emergency my savings were meant for. I found them in the living room, Dad watching the evening news while Mom worked on her laptop. Their house looked better than ever. They'd had the hardwood floors refinished last year, bought new furniture for the living room, and upgraded to a massive flat-screen TV that dominated one wall. "I need to talk to you both about something important," I said, settling into the chair across from them. Dad muted the television and gave me his attention. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I explained about the car, about Jerry's offer, about needing access to my savings account. They listened without interrupting, and I felt hopeful. This was reasonable. This was exactly what emergency funds were for. When I finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then my father started laughing. Not a small chuckle or a nervous laugh. A full, deep belly laugh like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. My mother joined in a moment later, their laughter echoing off the walls of their beautifully renovated living room. "You want us to give you $3,000? Dad asked when he finally caught his breath. "For a car? It's not giving me anything," I said, confusion and anger rising in my chest. "It's my money, from my savings account." "What savings account?" Mom asked, and her tone made my blood run cold. "The account you've been managing for me. The money I've been saving for 8 years. Another look passed between them, and this time I saw it clearly. This time I understood exactly what it meant. "Nick, honey," Mom said in that patronizing voice I'd grown to hate, "there is no savings account." The room started to spin. "What do you mean there's no account?" "We mean we spent that money years ago," Dad said matter-of-factly. "On the house, on improvements, on family expenses. We never promised to keep it sitting in some account collecting dust." "But the bank statements," I said desperately. "You showed me statements. You showed me the balance growing." Dad actually rolled his eyes. "Those were projections, Nick. Hypothetical numbers showing what you could have saved if we'd been putting the money away instead of using it for practical things." "Practical things? Like what?" "Like keeping a roof over your head," Mom snapped, her patience apparently exhausted. "Like food on the table, utilities, insurance, your college expenses. Do you have any idea how much it costs to raise a child? To support a grown adult living at home? I've been paying you $1,800 a month, which barely covers your expenses," Dad said. "The mortgage payment alone is $2,500. Add utilities, groceries, insurance, and you're costing us way more than you contribute." I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd believed about my financial situation, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, it was all a lie. "So there's nothing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 8 years of working, and there's nothing? "There's the life experience," Mom said brightly. "The work ethic we taught you, the values of contribution and responsibility, that's worth more than money, don't you think?" I stared at them in disbelief. They were sitting in their renovated living room, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly budget, talking about the life lessons they'd taught me by stealing every dollar I'd ever earned. "I can't get to work without a car," I said. "Then figure it out," Dad said, turning the volume back up on the television. "That's what adults do. They solve their own problems." I walked to my room in a daze, past the family photos lining the hallway, pictures of vacations I hadn't been able to afford to join, celebrations of achievements my money had probably helped fund. I sat on my childhood bed and tried to process what had just happened. They'd stolen from me. For 8 years, they'd stolen every penny I'd earned and then laughed when I needed help. They'd manipulated me, lied to me, and convinced me it was for my own good. And now, when I finally saw the truth, they acted like I was the unreasonable one for expecting basic human decency from my own parents. That night, I did something I should have done years earlier. I called my best friend Maya, the one person who'd been consistently questioning my family's financial arrangement since college. "They did what?" Maya's voice was sharp with anger when I finished explaining. "Nick, that's not normal. That's not teaching responsibility. That's financial abuse." "Financial abuse?" The term sounded dramatic, but as soon as she said it, something clicked into place. "You've been giving them your entire income for 8 years, and they've been spending it on themselves while keeping you financially dependent. That's literally the definition of financial abuse." I could hear her pacing on the other end of the line. "You need to get out of there." "I can't. I don't have any money. I don't have a car. I can't afford an apartment." "Then we'll figure it out together," Maya said firmly. "You're not staying in that house one more day than necessary." As I hung up the phone, something had shifted inside me. The naive girl who'd trusted her parents' financial wisdom was gone. In her place was someone angry, hurt, and finally ready to fight back. I didn't know how I was going to escape, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done being their victim. Maya showed up at my house the next morning with a determination that reminded me why we'd been best friends since freshman year of college. She was a social worker now, dealing with family crisis situations every day, and she brought that professional intensity to my personal disaster. "Pack a bag," she said the moment I opened the front door. "You're staying with me until we figure this out." "Maya, I can't just—" You can and you will. She pushed past me into the house, her curly red hair bouncing with each decisive step. Where are your parents? Work, I said quietly. They'd left that morning without speaking to me, as if our conversation the night before had never happened. Good. Pack clothes for a week. Essential documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport if you have one. Any personal items that matter to you. We're getting you out of here today. I started to protest, but Maya was already heading up the stairs to my room. As I followed her, I realized how desperately I wanted to leave this house, these people who'd been systematically destroying my financial future while calling it love. While I packed, Maya made phone calls. She had connections through her job, people who specialized in helping adults escape abusive family situations. I listened to her explain my situation with clinical precision, and hearing it described objectively made the abuse impossible to deny. Financial exploitation of an adult child, she was saying. 8 years of wage theft disguised as family contribution. Yes, I know how common it is. No, she doesn't qualify for traditional domestic violence resources, but... By noon, I was sitting in Maya's small apartment in Southeast Portland, surrounded by social service pamphlets and feeling overwhelmed by the kindness of a friend who refused to let me face this alone. First things first, Maya said, spreading papers across her coffee table. We need to understand your actual financial situation, not what your parents told you, but reality. I called my bank and requested statements for the past 2 years. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. There had been a savings account in my name, but it had been drained steadily over the past 3 years. The final withdrawal, for $2,047, had happened just 2 weeks ago. Around the same time, my parents had bought their new living room furniture. They forged my signature, I said, staring at the withdrawal slips the bank had emailed. How is that even legal? It's not, Maya replied grimly. It's fraud. You could press charges. The thought of putting my own parents in jail made me sick to my stomach, but the anger was growing stronger than the guilt. They'd stolen from me, lied to me, and laughed at my pain. They'd treated me like a personal ATM for 8 years. What about work? I asked. The immediate crisis of transportation was still looming. I'd already missed one day, and David was covering for me, but I couldn't keep taking the bus from Maya's apartment to downtown. It would take 2 hours each way. Actually, Maya said with a small smile, I might have a solution for that too. She explained that her brother Jake ran a small used car lot in Gresham. He specialized in helping people with credit problems or limited cash get reliable transportation. More importantly, he was willing to work with me on a payment plan. The catch is, you'd need to get your own bank account first, Maya said, one your parents can't access. That afternoon, I opened a new checking account at a credit union Maya recommended. Seeing my name on a bank card that my parents couldn't touch felt like the first step toward real independence. I also changed my direct deposit information with Morrison's HR department, ensuring my next paycheck would go to an account only I controlled. Jake's car lot was exactly what I'd expected. A small corner lot with about 20 vehicles and a trailer that served as an office. Jake himself was Maya's opposite in appearance, tall and quiet where she was short and energetic, but he had the same fundamental kindness. Maya explained your situation, he said, walking me toward a silver 2010 Honda Civic. This one's got 130,000 miles, but the engine's solid. Previous owner was an older lady who just needed something smaller. The car was nothing fancy, but it started immediately and felt stable on the test drive. Jake quoted me a price of $4,500, but offered to take $300 down and let me pay the rest at $200 a month. I can't pay $200 a month, I said, doing quick math in my head. After Maya helped me calculate a realistic budget, I'd have maybe $150 left over after basic expenses. How about $150 then? Jake said without hesitation. It'll take longer to pay off, but everyone deserves reliable transportation. I almost cried right there in his cluttered office. After years of my parents treating every dollar I earned like it belonged to them, having someone work with me instead of against me felt revolutionary. That evening, I drove my new-to-me Honda back to Maya's apartment with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. I had my own car, my own bank account, and a place to stay while I figured out my next steps. But Maya wasn't done helping me reclaim my life. Tomorrow we're apartment hunting, she announced over dinner. You need your own space, and I found some places in your budget. Maya, you've already done so much. This is what friends do, she said firmly. Besides, I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it because what your parents did makes me furious, and helping you escape is the best revenge I can think of. We spent the next 3 days looking at apartments. Most were depressing, tiny studios in questionable neighborhoods or basement units that never saw sunlight. But on Thursday, we found something perfect. A small one-bedroom apartment above a bakery in the Selwood district. It was cozy rather than cramped, with hardwood floors and windows that looked out over a tree-lined street. It's $750 a month, the landlord said, plus utilities. First month, last month, and security deposit up front. $22.50 to move in. I had maybe $400 in my account, and my first paycheck going to the new bank wouldn't arrive for another week. I can't swing it right now, I told Maya as we walked back to the car. But maybe in a month or two if I can save enough. Maya stopped walking and turned to face me. Nick, I have money saved. Let me loan you what you need to get started. I can't take your money, I protested. I already owe you more than I can repay. You don't owe me anything. And this isn't charity. It's an investment in your future. You pay me back when you can. No interest, no pressure. She grabbed my hands. Your parents made you think that asking for help was wrong, that you were a burden. But healthy people help each other. That's how real relationships work. That night, I signed a lease agreement for my first apartment. As I wrote my name on the contract, I realized I was signing more than a rental agreement. I was signing my Declaration of Independence from 8 years of financial abuse. I was finally ready to start building a life that truly belonged to me. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first personal day I'd taken in over a year, and spent the day moving my few belongings into my new home. Maya helped me set up the basics. A mattress on the floor, some dishes from Goodwill, a folding chair that would serve as my only furniture until payday. As the sun set over Portland, I sat in my empty apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced since I was 17 years old, complete control over my own life. My phone buzzed with angry texts from my parents demanding to know where I was, but for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel obligated to answer them. I was finally free. Now I just had to figure out how to stay that way. 6 months after moving into my Selwood apartment, I was sitting at my small kitchen table, actually a real table now, not a folding chair, reviewing my budget when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number. I'd been ignoring their calls for weeks, but something made me answer this time. Nick, thank God. Mom's voice was strained, different from the casual dismissal she'd shown the night my car broke down. We need to talk. About what? I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. About this situation. You disappearing, not contributing to household expenses, abandoning your family responsibilities. She paused, and I could hear Dad talking in the background. We're willing to forgive this phase you're going through if you come home and we can work something out. The audacity was breathtaking. After 8 years of financial abuse, they were offering to forgive me for escaping. I'm not going through a phase, Mom. I'm living my own life, living in some studio apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Nick, be reasonable. You had stability here, security. We were taking care of you. I looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much. Secondhand furniture, dishes from thrift stores, a TV Maya had given me when she upgraded hers. But every single item belonged to me. I'd earned it, chosen it, bought it with money that no one else controlled. You weren't taking care of me, I said quietly. You were taking advantage of me. That's ridiculous. We provided you with what? A room in exchange for my entire paycheck? The privilege of having no savings at 25? The joy of finding out my own parents had been lying to me for nearly a decade? We never lied to you. Dad's voice came through the phone now. He'd taken it from Mom. We taught you responsibility, work ethic, the value of contributing to your family. You taught me that family means exploitation, I replied. That love comes with a price tag. That trusting the people closest to me was the biggest mistake I could make. There was a long pause. When Dad spoke again, his voice had that cold edge I remembered from childhood, the tone that used to make me back down immediately. Fine, if that's how you want to be, don't come crying to us when your little experiment falls apart. Don't expect any help from us when you realize how hard the real world actually is. I won't, I said, and realized I meant it completely. I'd rather struggle on my own than succeed through stealing from other people. I hung up before he could respond, and immediately called Maya. How do you feel? She asked after I'd told her about the conversation. Free, I said, surprising myself with how true it was. Sad, but free. The sadness was real. Despite everything they'd done, these were still my parents. I grieved for the relationship we might have had, for the family I'd thought we were, for the trust that could never be rebuilt. But the freedom was stronger than the sadness. Work had become a refuge during this period. David Chen had noticed my increased focus and dedication, and our boss, Sarah Morrison, had started giving me more interesting projects. I was handling full campaigns now instead of just supporting other people's work, and my confidence was growing along with my responsibilities. You seem different lately, David said one afternoon as we wrapped up a client presentation. More, I don't know, grounded, focused. I thought about how to explain without getting into the messy details of my family situation. I guess I'm finally figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to please everyone else. David nodded like that made perfect sense. It shows in your work. You should think about asking Sarah for a raise. You've been here over a year and you're handling way more responsibility than when you started. The idea of asking for a raise had never occurred to me. In my family, money was always something other people controlled, something I had to justify needing. But David was right. I was good at my job, and I deserved to be compensated fairly for the value I brought to the company. 2 weeks later, I walked into Sarah's office with a folder full of successful campaigns, client testimonials, and a carefully researched proposal for a salary increase. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady as I made my case. "This is impressive work, Nick," Sarah said, reviewing my portfolio. "I had no idea you'd been tracking your contributions this systematically." "I believe in being prepared," I said, which was true. Maya had helped me put together the presentation, teaching me that advocating for yourself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. "I can offer you a 10% increase effective immediately," Sarah said. "And I'd like to discuss promoting you to senior associate by the end of the year if you keep up this level of performance." I walked out of that meeting feeling like I could fly. A 10% raise meant an extra $3,000 a year, money that would go directly into my own accounts, toward my own goals, building my own future. That evening, I celebrated by buying groceries without checking my bank balance first. It was a small thing, but for someone who'd been financially controlled for 8 years, the freedom to buy vegetables and decent coffee without calculating every dollar felt revolutionary. Maya insisted on taking me out for drinks to celebrate both the raise and my growing independence. We went to a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place I never would have been able to afford when I was handing over my paychecks to my parents. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Maya said, raising her glass for a toast. "It's not the apartment or the job or even standing up to your parents. It's that you're becoming who you were always meant to be." "What do you mean?" "When I met you in college, you were always apologizing for taking up space, always worried about being a burden, always putting everyone else's needs first. But lately, you've been, I don't know, more yourself, more confident, more willing to believe you deserve good things." She was right. The girl who'd handed over her first paycheck at 17 because she didn't want to disappoint her parents was gone. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, who could ask for what she deserved, who understood that real love didn't come with financial strings attached. As winter turned to spring, I established new rhythms and traditions. Sunday morning farmers markets where I could afford to buy fresh flowers along with vegetables. Evening walks along the river where I'd plan goals instead of worrying about money. Regular coffee dates with David, who'd become not just a colleague, but a genuine friend. I also started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped young adults escape financial abuse from family members. Maya had connected me with the organization, and I discovered that my story wasn't unique. There were dozens of people who'd experienced similar manipulation, and many of them were further along in their recovery journey. "The hardest part isn't the practical stuff," said Jennifer, a woman in her 30s who'd escaped a similar situation 5 years earlier. "It's learning to trust your own judgment again, to believe that you deserve financial independence." Listening to other survivors helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't just wrong. It was part of a recognizable pattern of abuse. They'd isolated me financially, made me dependent on them, and convinced me that their control was actually protection. The guilt I felt about leaving wasn't evidence that I'd made a mistake. It was evidence of how thoroughly they'd conditioned me to prioritize their needs over my own well-being. 1 year after moving into my apartment, I had $5,000 in my savings account. It wasn't much by most people's standards, but it represented something my parents had never allowed me to have: security that belonged entirely to me. I celebrated that milestone by doing something I'd dreamed about for years. I booked a weekend trip to Seattle, just because I wanted to. I walked through Pike Place Market, took a ferry across Puget Sound, and ate dinner at restaurants I chose without asking anyone's permission or worrying about contributing to someone else's bills. Sitting in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, watching the rain that seemed to follow me everywhere I went, I thought about the girl who'd trusted her parents with her first paycheck. She'd believed that love meant sacrifice, that family meant giving up your dreams for other people's comfort, that financial independence was selfish. Now I knew better. Real love wanted you to succeed. Healthy families celebrated your independence, not sabotaged it. And financial autonomy wasn't selfish. It was the foundation of every other kind of freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "How's Seattle? Send pictures." I smiled and took a photo of my coffee cup against the window, raindrops blurring the city lights beyond. Then I typed back, "Perfect, absolutely perfect." For the first time in my adult life, that was completely true. I was exactly where I belonged, building exactly the life I wanted, with money I'd earned and freedom I'd fought for. It had taken 8 years to escape the trap my parents had built, but I was finally, truly free, and I was never going back.